Hello, healthy people, and welcome back to the Organelle podcast. Today we're exploring the health impacts of our environments. We're going to navigate through the intriguing relationship between these physical environments and our health levels, what typically goes wrong in the relationship between those two things, and what simple actions we can all take to improve. As always, I'm Xavier Greenhalgh, and joining me will be none other than the Organelle Digital Health Platform's founding practitioner, Lionel Godwin. So, without further ado, let's all take the next step on our health journeys. And we're back. Lionel, my friend, it's good to see you again.
Xavier, likewise. It's been a week, and happy to be back.
It's been a few days, I suppose. Okay, so today we got the finale for our Organelle Basics series. It's a really juicy one because today we're talking about environments. The environments that we all live in and how they affect our health. I will make the caveat that we're talking purely about the physical environment that we're located in, not so much the social or psychological environment, each of which could be a series of episodes on their own. So to start us off in a beautiful place, Lionel, could you briefly and broadly define what is your physical environment as it relates to health?
Okay, so the physical environment as it relates to health is really it's the natural and the built up world that we live in, and the impact that that natural and built up world can have on our health. So factors that we're looking at they include things such as air quality, water quality, access to green spaces, for instance. And I notice a new addition to your little room there, some nice plants there, which is, that really helps. The presence of pollutants, the availability of healthy food is really important. Um, Safety obviously plays a big part, noise levels, and the overall design and infrastructure around the communities that we live in. These environmental factors can significantly influence our physical health and our well-being, but also increase the risk of developing various diseases and conditions. So, yeah, it's a combination of all of those factors.
Right. Yeah. I think it's kind of hard to just define for the listener what we really mean when we're talking about physical environments, but it is just exactly that. It's the literal physical space that you occupy for most of your day. The most common ones that are going to be highest impact to you are going to be the places that you work, the places that you sleep, the places that your home, your office essentially are going to be the two big ones. And then potentially, if you're often you have some kind of favorite hobby that's going to take you into a specific physical environment. Like if you're into weightlifting or fitness, you might be going to the gym a lot, so that's going to be an important environment for you. Okay, just getting that out of the way, Lionel, will do straight away what the user wants to hear, which is what are the most common negative factors that are going to play into physical environments?
Okay, again, so thinking about what I alluded to earlier, then so the things that have a negative impact, exposure to really poor air. If you're working in a really stuffy environment and you're breathing in stale air all the time, that's a factor. If you're in a gym, for instance, and people aren't using good hygiene practices, they're not wiping down benches, they're not using towels, things like that. That plays a really significant part. Poor sanitation. We don't suffer from that in Australia, obviously, but that's a real factor. Uh, uh, you know, Not having access to good, healthy food is a really significant factor. Noise pollution, funnily enough, a lot of people don't realise just how impactful noise can be on our overall state of health and well-being. Again, simple factors like living in a really unsafe house. Say you're living in a house that's got asbestos in it, or a lot of old wiring, or a lot of old copper piping and things like that. These can all have a really significant impact on our environment in a negative way. Another thing is access to good healthcare as well. This can really have a negative impact. Um, and all of these things can lead to respiratory diseases, cardiovascular, cancer disease, cancer spreads, and other health conditions that we might not immediately be aware of.
What's up with noise?
Well, noise can be really overwhelming for people. There, you're probably not aware of it, but a lot of people can suffer from what we call hyperacusis. And hyperacusis is an absolute sensitivity to noise. And that can be really debilitating for people and have a massive impact on people's stress levels and anxiety. And for other people, just not noise can really distract you from concentrating. And again, that can have a really negative impact. Noise can be really overwhelming for people. And noise could just be the normal clutter of an office. It could be, you're working, your office might be on a busy highway, for instance, and you just can't shut out the noise. That can be really distracting for people. I've had a lot of my clients over the years, have been really impacted by noise, and can find it really stressful. Again, noise can really impact sleep as well. So another environmental factor. If you can't get a good sleep and the body's not able to balance out its hormones and its chemicals and get its rest and restoration from sleep, you can imagine the impact that noise has on a good restful sleep.
Yeah, I think you're touching there on something that's really important when we're thinking about the environment, which is kind of the indirect nature of all these changes. In that we're going to have a lot of things like noise, where it's going to not directly like misaffect your health, but it's going to ping off all of these other things. Like it's going to raise your stress levels. It's going to decrease your ability to focus, which is in turn going to raise your stress levels again. It's going to do things like keep you distracted and away from work, and just that will compound with another layer of things, and that will compound with another layer of things, and overall, it'll have this massive effect on your health that you're just not going to be able to really accurately predict when you're just looking at okay noise. That's really really interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. I think it's really important to touch on these factors that we don't really think of as like direct environmental factors like noise, but are actually crucially important.
And it's
Do you have
not just
anything?
noise.
Yeah, enlighten us. What are the other things that we probably
So,
think?
I'm looking at the plants that you've got in your office there now. Just having access to green spaces, where you can just actually just sit down and relax and feel calm and feel the natural energies and vibrations and the rhythm of nature. That can have, a really positive impact on our overall health and well-being. And it's something that we don't relate to enough. A lot of us, if we're working in really, up, areas that are really built up, we don't have access to a lot of green areas. So when we may be going out of the office for a half an hour to have some lunch or to just kick back and relax, if we're confounded by noise and building and poor light and yeah, poor air quality, again, we're not having a restful and relaxing time. We go back to work thinking that we should be recharged and reinvigorated, but the reality is we're probably not. We've been in this hyper-tense environment, and so we haven't had that time just to switch off and calm down. So I personally find nature one of the most calming environments that I can be in, and I at least twice a day I will find a way of getting into a nice green space or a nice space that has water around it. For me personally, I find water very calming, even in a built-up environment. Just seeing water in a water fountain or having being able to view water has a real calming effect on me. And these are things that we should just be aware of. That when we are when we are in an environment that is really quite hypertense, we need to find areas within there that can provide some sort of calming impact on us.
Take the monkey out of the jungle. You can't take the jungle out of the monkey, eh?
No, you're dead right. You're dead
Okay,
right.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, Lionel. I have to shadow your perceived like awesome picture of me. This is a fake plant. I'm
Oh my
afraid
goodness, I'm
doesn't
shattered.
doesn't count. I got a fake plant. I bought it from IKEA. I'm a horrible person.
Uh,
Okay, but let's go back to basics, right? Let's talk the what I perceive to be the three big things because I didn't know noise existed. Let's talk air quality. Let's talk water quality, and let's talk sunlight. What are your opinions on those three things in the modern workplace?
Okay, air quality, obviously, number one. If we're breathing in really, really, really poor air, one, it's going to cause some long-term respiratory issues and other health conditions as well. It'll impact on our lung capacity and our capacity to get good oxygenated blood around our system. If we're drinking, really poor quality water, that's not hydrating us as well as, say, a high alkaline water. That a water that has alkalinity around, above 7, um, it provides, a really good alkaline environment for our body. And the more alkaline our body is, the better the conditions are for health and healing. And, these things, they are really, 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 really really important. And then, as I alluded to earlier, the frustrations from noise in particular can be really unsettling for people. We don't, as humans, we generally don't drink enough water anyway, and the water quality is really poor. And the water quality can be really poor because of, just really poor uh, plumbing in the areas that you are.
Okay, we lost you for a second there, Lionel. But
Yeah.
okay, I think we've laid out the. Well, we've got air and water. What are your thoughts on sunlight?
And yes, sunlight. Sunlight, for me is invigorating. Anytime we can get some good sun on our skin, I just find it's a natural invigorator for human beings. There's the warmth, there's the energy that you get from sunlight. Obviously, there's the positive impacts of the vitamin D as well. Obviously, we don't want an overexposure of sunlight, but we talk about environmental factors. If you're working in an office and you've got access to good natural light, which obviously comes from the sun, then that has a really positive impact on our overall mood and our energy levels as well.
Are you an advocate of sunscreen?
Um, well, yes, in that
Well, yes,
circumstantially, yes.
but
I mean, um, we should all be very, very, very aware of the issues around skin cancer. We have a high incidence of skin cancer in Australia. Someone who is as fair as you, for instance, Xavier, not to disparage your fairness, is should use sunscreen a lot. I'm a bit more olive-skinned. I personally have never used a sunscreen in my life, but that's probably a poor practice on my part. I grew up um, in an environment where to wear a hat or wear sunglasses or to wear sunscreen, you would have got picked on effectively. I grew up in the Northern Territory. It's a pretty, uh, how would I say, testosterone driven society. Darwin and back in the early 60s and 70s when I was a teenager, and it was frowned upon to show any form of weakness, and so it was just a natural thing for me not to ever apply that. But as a father and a grandfather, I've encouraged my children to certainly use sunscreen and other skin creams as well to protect the skin. I've been very lucky in that, even though I was exposed to a lot of sunlight, my natural pigment in my skin has probably helped me somewhat. But I am, in answer to your question, yeah, an advocate for sunscreen, and particularly with the young. They should always be protected. And parents are very good now with putting their kids out into the sun. With the different clothing that they now wear when they go swimming and stuff like that. And nearly every child that I see these days wears hats and sunglasses and longer type bathing equipment or bathing materials when they're swimming and exposed to the sunlight. So yes, I think we should be very, very aware of the damage that can come from sunlight.
right, neither good nor bad and absolute. You've got to find the golden middle.
Understanding that sun plays a really important part in our bodies absorbing vitamin D, and we know the correlation between that and bone density. Really, vitamin D really helps with our absorption of calcium as well. So we should always get some exposure to sun, but we should limit overexposure to the sun.
Gotcha. Right, so we got a pretty thorough guide on how to deal with sun in your environments right there. What can we do personally about water and about air quality?
Okay, so the best way is to get some filtration on your home or in your offices to take out any of the nasties that could exist in water. And you hear almost daily water systems being impregnated with different bacteria and stuff, and councils and governments are very, very aware and have a lot more control these days over the quality of water that we're getting. Certainly plumbing practices and filtration systems are far more advanced now than they were back even when I was a child. I mean, the advances have been extraordinary. So, you know, um, I personally like to have my own filtration systems. There are a number of different water systems that you can have. I personally like to have a higher alkaline water that I use for my own drinking, and I have a lower alkaline water when I'm using for washing vegetables and stuff like that. Um, but we should always try and control the quality of our water as best we can. And for some people, that might be buying bottled water. For other people, it might be having just faith in the systems that are providing water into their homes. But you know, I often advise people, when I'm talking to clients and they're concerned about the quality of their water, get your water tested. There are a number of water testing facilities and businesses around these days that can test the quality of the water that you're drinking. And it's always good to have the heads up on the quality of water that you're drinking. It may mean that you have to make some changes. But this information you can now get there. As I said, there are so many water testing businesses out there that it's something that we should be very cognizant of. As best we can, if we are, that we should be getting it tested.
Yeah, that sounds like some effective stuff that you can do around water. We're talking obviously underwater filtration systems, under sink filtration systems, and then even like the countertop ones you can get. Or if that's outside of your like range here, just buying bottled water or faith in the system, as we put up there. Just briefly, because I don't want to spend too long on this, but I think it's important to define for the listener, what do we mean when we talk about alkaline water?
So the higher the greater the alkalinity in the water, the better our body absorbs it, the better our cells absorb water, and the better our body reacts to that alkaline water. It just provides for a much more homogeneous environment within our body.
Right,
The
and
lower the alkalinity,
outside of
go
yeah,
on.
outside of getting like $1,000 benchtop filter that comes with an alkaline mineral infuser, whatever. What can we do to increase the alkalinity in our water?
I personally I normally add lime or lemon juice to my water, or a good salt, so a sea salt or a rock salt or a Himalayan salt. I will add that will increase the alkalinity of our water. There's mixed theories around adding citrus, like I do. Dentists and some dentists will tell you that it has an impact on the enamel in your teeth. I personally haven't experienced that, and I've been doing it for over 40 years now. And there are other dentists that say it has no impact on you whatsoever. I'm not a dentist, so I'm not going to give advice one way or the other on that. But for me personally, that's how I do it. I also have filtration systems at home. I have considered at various times buying some of the various machines that are out there that where you can improve the alkalinity of your water as well. I haven't gone down that path because I think I monitor my water very well, and certainly my water intake very well. So I haven't needed to go down that path. But for certainly people living in certain areas of the country where the water quality is poor, sometimes the investment in a good machine can make a really vital difference to the quality of the water that you're drinking.
Beautiful. Okay. Sun done, water done. What can we do about air?
Again, the more green spaces, the more trees that we can surround ourselves with, the better we know our air is being treated. Clearly, wearing a mask, which we've all become very familiar with over the last few years with COVID, that can certainly act as a filtration system as well. And limiting your exposure to areas where it's obvious that there is poor air quality. So, what are they? If you're working in an area in a very industrialized area where there's a lot of industry going on, a lot of smokestacks or a lot of toxic or pollutants in the environment. You can see a lot of hazardous chemicals around the place. You limit your exposure to that. If you're walking in built-up cities where there's just thousands upon thousands of cars, trucks, buses, and trains, etc., going by you, you try and limit your exposure to that. You certainly try not to exercise in those environments where you're increasing your air capacity or the amount of air that you're breathing in. Wearing a mask, as I said, in those conditions makes a really significant difference. And yeah, just creating awareness around the air quality.
Right. So I was trying to think about where we'd encounter these kind of bad environments because I wanted to give some targeted feedback to the listeners. I came up with two things. You touched on one of them there. The first one is obviously motorways, particularly if live in a big city and you're spending like an hour driving to work, an hour driving home, or whatever. You spend a lot of time on a motorway. I don't know how good the filtration systems are in a car's aircon, or even if people use them that often. But is there anything you know of, Lionel, that we could do to improve the air quality inside of our cars?
Well, certainly we do have air filters in our cars, especially more modern cars. And I often, when I get my cars serviced, one of the things that I insist that they do is change the air conditioning filters, because I do think they play an active role. I try and have my aircon on a closed circuit. I don't know whether you're familiar with your car, but you can see where the air comes in. There's two little buttons there. One's got the circulation, the other one's got the outside air coming in. I always try and turn off the outside air coming in. And as I said, I always get my air conditioning filters changed. They're generally fairly easy accessible. They're normally in the dash area of your car. And I insist every 12 months that in my cars, those filters are changed.
Yeah, that only comes to mind for me is because I was reading the other day that one of the numerous bells and whistles on a Tesla is that they have a medical grade air filter that makes the air quality inside like as good as an operating room, which seems ridiculous and overblown, but you do you, Elon. Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, Elon's no fool, and he's very aware of what he's doing. And look, I support that. I think any time, particularly if you spend a lot of time in the car, I think the quality of that air is no different to being in a stuffy office, as we alluded to earlier. And the better we can improve our air quality, obviously, the better it's going to be for us in the long term.
What do you think about the like pedestal fan things that act as air filters?
Well, they've come a long way. They're not necessarily pedestal fans. I've never known of a pedestal fan. Well, I'm not familiar with a pedestal fan anyway that acts as an air filter, but there are a number of air filtration systems now.
Yeah, and that brings up what I want to get into next, just before we close out the episode. There's something I've become recently aware of called the hygiene hypothesis. And the gist of it, at least as far as I'm aware, and I'm no expert, is that because being so hygienic, we're sterilizing all the air, all the water, everything that touches us essentially, removing all of the bad stuff from it. What that's doing is depriving our immune systems of the ability to fight the battles against those things and grow stronger. And as a result, because we live in these hyper sterile environments, we are slowly and slowly trending towards weaker and weaker and weaker immune systems. And they use this as a theory for explaining why allergies are becoming much more popular. What are your thoughts on that line?
I 100% agree, and I've got the beauty of being much older than you, and I know the environments in which I grew up, and my children grew up, and I also know the environment in which my grandchildren grow up, and the prevalence now of throat infections and colds and flus, it seems to be far more prevalent now than it was when I was growing up. When I grew up, we played in the dirt, we played in mud, we climbed trees, we swam in the ocean, we swam in creeks, and I believe all of that exposure helped our body create natural immune responses. Really helped with the development of antibodies that protected us in the long term. And you see, the more sterile the environment these days, the more people are becoming, and particularly younger people, are becoming unwell or increasingly impacted by bacteria and pathogens and viruses and the like. So I think there's a lot to it. I'm a great believer in allowing kids to play in the dirt and eat dirt and pick up grubs and bugs and eat leaves and stuff like that, because in essence, I think it creates a really strong environment within the body to develop our immune system and antibodies. I do a lot of study on Indigenous Australians, for instance, and they are great believers in the strength of being exposed to all of the things that are in our environment at a very young age, which helps really build not only the immune system, but they also use a lot of these environmental factors in treatments as well. A lot of bush medicine are very, very, very effective in combining with the natural antibodies that we've developed by being exposed to these things in a less hygienic environment.
Excellent. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear, and I think we could do a whole episode in the future on that. But I think
Yeah.
that's a good place to leave it now. Last thing I
Just on
wanted
that
to know
though,
is,
I
yeah,
there's just a couple of things that I think people should be aware of when it comes to, trying to change or improve the environment and, that they're in. And, for me, there's several steps that we can take, to really improve the environment that we're in. Ergonomic furniture, something as simple as ergonomic furniture, so the way that you're sitting, your posture can make a big, big, big difference. Equipment, ergonomic equipment makes a big difference. Having an environment that promotes exercise and activity and breaks within the office, I think is really, really important. Looking at ways and means of improving the air quality, I think is also really, really important. Encouraging healthy eating options, again, really, really important. And creating a really supportive and stress-free work environment as well, through the culture of your work environment, I think can make um, a big difference. And then finally, trying to incorporate as much natural light as we can, I think makes a really positive impact on our overall health and work environment.
very well summed up. Okay, I think that combined with the rest of the conversation we've had today is a lot of information. It's a lot of action points people can go in action to improve their environments and improve their health. But I want to bring it all back into one kind of concise thing we can give the listener, and that's by asking you a question. I want you to imagine the average information worker type person, someone who's 9 to 5, drives on a motorway to work, stuck in an office, doesn't get much sunlight, sitting in a bad ergonomic chair, drives home, sits inside, watches Netflix, goes to bed. Typical, very, very atypical person. What is the number one action you would, if they could only take one action, what would you recommend they do to improve their environment? And I'm going to preface this with the cheat code that you can't say understanding.
I won't say understanding, but I will say become an active participant in your own health and well-being. And for me, the number one thing is the food that you eat. It's about making sure that you have a really well constructed, balanced diet.
Okay. And after nutrition,
Exercise.
what in the environment is the number one thing?
Oh, that I could change in the environment? That
Yeah.
would be to change the environment. If it's a really poor environment, try and change the environment by, again, there's not a simple answer, Xavier. There's not a one thing that you can do. It's actually a culmination of a number of different factors that we need to be aware of. I don't think there is just a single thing, particularly if it is as bad as you described it, that you're working in this crappy office, you're driving home to a crappy car, you're going and sitting on your lounge, then there are a number of things that you need to change. You just need to be very, very prepared to change them. I wish I could give you a one thing. There really isn't, other than being a really active participant in improving your health and well-being.
Yeah, I guess there are no easy answers to these health questions. That annoys
Yeah.
my Gen Z brain, but we can roll with it.
And that's it. I mean, one of the things that is a big problem for us is that, particularly with the younger generation, they're used to quick fixes or wanting quick fixes and immediate responses. Sometimes health is not immediate. It takes time and effort. And as I said, you need to be an active participant in it.
Yeah, for better or worse, it is just kind of the mindset of you Google it, you click the first link, and within 30 seconds you should find the answer to your problem.
Yeah,
That's
I
not
don't
quite
think
the
I
case
don't.
here. Okay, I'll have to do some deprogramming in my own brain. But for the listener here, this has been our episode on environment. It has been fantastic. Thank you for your time today, Lionel.